Do you see your little the sweetest way of rustling yet devised? 'Cause when your well, looky how them cows get hypnotized. He don't fraud, he don't yell, still he drives them doggies well, which ain't easy when your chaps are labeled XXXXL. Yes, if you're looking from a bovine.
Hello, I'm Jesse McAnally.
And I'm Andrew DeWolf.
And today we've got an extra special bonus episode, and I'm actually surprised. I'm amazed that we have this person.
I don't know how
on,
you pulled this
sincerely.
guy.
But please join me in welcoming artist, animator, and director, who you may know from the Proud Family, DC Superhero Girls, New Mr. Peabody and Sherman, and of course the director of Home on the Range, John Sanford. Thank you for
one of the
joining us.
directors. Will Finn
Yes,
is the
one
other
of
one.
two
That's
directors.
true. One of.
Yes.
Co-directors, as is
Co-directors,
very
yeah.
common in animated feature films. Thank you for joining us, John.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for reaching out and because I'm always up for talking about this.
Oh, heck yeah. Well, since
Good,
we
bad,
are
and
diving
indifferent.
into this, when did you start in like Disney animation? How'd you get to the point where you are the director of Home on the Range?
I started at Disney in I'm gonna watch your eyes to gauge just how young you guys are. I started at Disney in 93,
Okay.
1993. And I started as a storyboard artist on Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Mm.
And after that, I was on Mulan, um, following that, I went to Atlantis. I was promoted to head of story on Atlantis, and in between Atlantis and, Home on the Range, I got an opportunity. I showed an aptitude for writing and story, and so they said, "Would you like to maybe try directing something?" And I said, "I have an idea that I'd like to pitch." So I wrote up a proposal, pitched it, and that idea didn't go, but I got to work on it for a few months. And the manner in which I wrote it and brought it to them was professional enough and complete enough that when Home on the Range, which was at the time Sweating Bullets,
Mhm.
it had
Yeah.
two directors previously who were not able to make it mesh for whatever reason. I at this point in my career, I have to specify. I don't think this is a reflection on them. I think this is a reflection on just material, like the studio mandates and different things changing, and it just didn't wasn't
It's a
their
lot of
movie
stuff that
anymore.
seemed to go on in this from what we saw, but
Yeah, I
Yeah,
tried to do the most research I could about this and like all the different variations of things that happened because there
I
was like a transfer right after Home on the
yeah,
Range.
I can tell you. I'll after this, I'll go into more detail about that if you want. But
Love to.
they offered. Will Finn was already on the movie.
Mhm.
He was in story, and he was going to be animating the character Maggie, supervising Maggie. And they said, "Would you like to take this over?" And he said, "Yeah, I think I can do this." And they said, "Who would you like as your co-director?" And Will and I were friends from Hunchback, and we've been talking in between. And he said, "How about John Sanford?" And they agreed, much to my dismay.
Oh
So
no.
oh no.
um, they brought
You
me
didn't
on
want to
as
do this project, or
I did. I knew it was there was a lot going on at the studio at the time. I don't know how long you guys have. So if I wander off the subject, just
it's
Mhm.
shut me
go
down or
wherever you
shut me
want.
up.
We'll
We'll
pipe in
follow.
if we need
Okay.
to.
So there are a lot of projects at the studio at the time that were in flux. One of which, Emperor's New Groove was being made at the time, which at the time was Kingdom of the Sun. It was caught in if you know anything about that project, it was one thing, it became another, and they
Yeah.
swapped directors on that. They were making a movie called Wildlife, and if you want, you can Google that one. That was it was going to be the studio's first or second CG movie that had a really kind of a more adult bent to it and had a very interesting kind of weird look and was about it was kind of like I always think of it as kind of like a takeoff of like kind of like a Star is Born only with a singing elephant with disco
Oh, oh,
and nightclubs.
oh, oh,
What?
oh.
Yeah,
I want to
and
see the pitch deck for that film.
This was called
it
Wildlife?
Wildlife. It was called Wildlife. Um, and um, my sun. The sun is just shining through and bearing down on my forehead. This I'm in Los Angeles and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Or three, yeah, 4 o'clock. So what happened was that with all these different projects in flux at the time, um, there's so much going on. I can't even remember the question you asked. There's so much going on that I helped out on that one a little bit. I was pulled into that one to try and help them with that one. That didn't work out. And then so they like what happened was that I was on Atlantis. I was working on my own thing. I was called in and they said, "Hey, would you please go over and work with them on Wildlife and for just a little bit and help them out?" And I said, "Okay, sure." And then few weeks later, I'm called in again, and Pam Pam Coates was the vice president of animation at the time, and she said, "You're going to stop taking calls from me." And I said, "What?" And it was because I'd heard that Sweating Bullets was in trouble. They were having a lot of trouble,
Mhm.
just a lot of trouble. It was in a similar vein to Wildlife. Now, what happened with Wildlife is they shut it down
Yeah.
completely. They just pulled the
Yeah.
plug. Roy Disney famously wasn't a fan, and there was other issues that they were having, so they just pulled the plug. I know that they nearly did that. It would come as no surprise to anyone that they nearly did that on Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they at least it was at least brought up in the meeting. With Sweating Bullets, they were far enough down the road that it was a movie they just had to make. So she said, "Would you like to do this?" And I said, "Let me go home and discuss it with my wife." And so I went home, and Sarah was like, I walked in, I told Sarah, um, they want me to co-direct this movie, and she said, "And you said yes, right?" And I said, and I said, "No," I said, "I'd discuss it with you." And she was like, "Well, go back and say yes." And so she was
Make the cow movie.
"This is what you want to do, right?" And I said, "Well," and that's the thing is like I the thing I it wasn't what I knew of the movie was not like I like westerns. I don't love westerns.
Mhm.
I was not a big fan of musicals. And I knew that Home on the Range was musical, and this always comes
Mhm.
as a surprise to people. Like, you worked at Disney, you worked on Mulan, you worked on Hunchback. I'm like, yeah, I wasn't a fan of musicals. I don't know, and I still to this day, even though I've come around on musicals
Mhm.
quite a bit, I like a lot of them. Um, I just wasn't. It just wasn't my forte. I knew I had learned to board songs. I'd learned how to get in and out of songs, and I like music. I just didn't like Broadway style
Mhm.
musicals.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of I had to think about it. And I'm like, is it in that, is this right for me to do? Am I going to do a good job on this? And ultimately, I just thought, well, there's enough people around me that know this stuff. I think I'll be okay.
Mhm.
So that's how I kind of got roped into it.
So I'm
So to
curious,
speak.
when you're brought into a film that's already kind of had a rocky road, let's say that, and a lot of creative decisions have been made before you're even onto it. How much creative voice do you really get into this? Like, is it already cast with the people that are brought in by the other command, or is it basically like fresh start, or where can we use these background assets and whatnot to?
It's interesting because the when I sat down with Pam, Pam said, "There's a lot. You have a lot of leeway. Here are the things you can't change. We've already decided it's gonna be 3 cows, so it has to be 3 cows."
Okay. So you
He
came in when
already
it's
made the
already 3
decision.
cows.
Yeah,
It's already 3
at
cows.
that
It's
point, it's
too
already
late.
3 cows. Um, we're pretty happy with the casting, and the casting at that point was Janae Dubois was Maggie,
Ooh.
um,
Ooh.
Judi Dench was, Calloway.
Mhm.
That's the hat
Mhm.
cow's name, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, that's that'll come up again.
We think you would know.
No, we got that was a running gag in editorial meetings is that Will and I would forget their names and would just call out
The hat one, you
yeah,
know.
Hat Cow. In fact, there's a bit in the movie that's based on that where Buck can't remember their names, and all the names that he calls out are names that we called them in editorial. So that's a little Easter egg for us. So when he calls her Hat Cow, that's what I would literally just say, "Okay, the Hat Cow comes in." We would just say that. So anyway, so she
Was
said,
Jennifer Tilly still the third cow, or
"No,
was
that
it?
was Sarah Jessica Parker.
Okay.
That was
So that's
Sarah
like
Jessica Parker."
that's some good casting that I can understand how you got to your final casting from there.
Right. Now yeah, because what's interesting is that when we came and she said, "You can you, the story was still in there were still elements of the story we could change. There's still
Mhm.
elements of the characters that weren't dialed in, just so that we had some leeway with that." The first thing I wanted to do when I saw the screening is I saw the song "Patch of Heaven." It's that happy
The Katie
tune they
Lang
all sing
song.
on the farm. And I went to it as a like, they always have internal screenings and they invite
Mhm.
everybody and they're like, "We want your notes." So because I was a director in development and a head of story, they especially part of my job was giving notes on other projects. So I was
Mhm.
like, "Okay, I'm here with my pencil and I'm here with my pad." And I saw that song and I went, "Stage weight, terrible, dated." All these different things that I just hated it. I didn't like it at all, and so one of the first things I wanted to do was cut that song, and she said, "You can change anything, that song is in production, you can't cut it. You can't change it." Without me even saying that, even saying, "I'd like to cut that song," she said, "That's gonna be our first thing into production. It's gonna help you set your style, it's gonna help you the animators get used to their characters. It's it's a tent pole, you can't touch it." And they'd already recorded it with,
Mhm.
Katie Lang,
Yes.
and so they were in love with that song. Um,
They
and so I
wanted
went,
that song to,
"Okay."
like, sell the movie probably.
I
Yeah.
mean, they did use it in all the marketing, and it is an earworm.
It's okay. The thing I don't like about it to this day, and I hope Alan I don't know if Alan and Glenn will listen to it. I like Alan and Glenn a lot, and
Mhm.
this is nothing against them. They were, it's a song that kinda just introduces that world, and nobody sings it, and I think that might be part of the issue,
Mhm.
is that there's nobody singing it. It's kind of a needle drop.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a
and
lot of
it
songs like that in Home on the Range, I think. There's only one
yeah,
song, like, a
Yeah.
character actually sings.
yeah, nobody it and that's kinda where we were as a studio. We decided we figured like, as a studio, we'd figured out that, like, at that time, the
Phil
moviegoing audience
Collins.
didn't want we didn't want songs, like sung on songs. They liked the
Mhm.
way Pixar was doing with musicals, which was, um, you can have songs, but like when You Got a Friend in Me plays,
Mhm.
Woody's not singing it, Andy's not singing it. It's just playing.
Yeah.
Jesse's song in Toy Story 2 is a gut punch of an emotional sequence, and it's not sung, it just plays. And so the studio kind of went, that's a very modern way of doing a musical. Perhaps we should back off on because they had just released Pocahontas, which did not make back its money.
Yeah.
Hunchback, which did not make back its money.
Really?
Hercules, which did not make back its money.
Okay.
They're all failures, all three
Wow.
of them, box office failures. Um, and so they were like, what? After Hercules failed, they were just like, we have no idea what to do. But one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to force characters to be singing on screen anymore because that's seen as dated and people don't seem to like it. So let's just back off on it. And so that was the approach on Home on the Range. Now, if Will and I had decided that we wanted to have characters sing, um, and I think we would have been able to do it because Alan would have like jumped out of his chair and embraced us and named his next 17 grandchildren after us because that's what he wanted all along.
Right.
But we didn't, I in particular didn't think it was always kind of weird to me that characters would sing. Um, it just to me it just broke the reality of the movie rather, and that's how I saw it then. I don't
Mhm.
see it that way anymore, but I saw it that way then.
Mhm.
So that was the things that we did change on the movie is when we first got onto the movie, the cows were these really bright kind of primary, like really super
Mhm.
bright pastel colors. Like
Ooh.
Maggie was literally red, like red on
Okay.
red.
Red.
Callaway was purple on purple, dark purple on light purple. Grace was more or less kind of like was more of a dialed, more of a yellow yellow.
Mhm.
So
Like
the
a
one thing
coloring
we
book.
did was we were like that this feels young because the characters look like they're kind of look like they're Care Bears for lack
Yeah.
of a better term.
Yeah.
So we said, can we take a more rounded approach to the color? So that's when they just took Maggie's colors and went "Zzz," and dialed it to a more real place. They made Callaway a black and white like Jersey cow, which worked great. And Grace, they just kind of dialed into more of a yellow ochre, which is also a more grounded color. So we did those things. Um, we reconceived the Jennifer Tilly, the Grace character, which was what became Jennifer Tilly. We kept thinking the story artist had this idea that she had this new agey approach. It was based on this character. There was this character on an episode of Absolutely Fabulous that they thought was hilarious, played by I can't remember the name of the actress, but everything was dialed through this new agey crystal stuff, and so we thought that's kind of funny, and then we can kind of make her spacey, and she can play off she'll play off the other two more
Right.
reasonably. And Sarah Jessica Parker, God bless her, didn't understand it.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Like, she
no.
didn't get what
She
you
was
wanted,
Yeah,
or
because we'd like have something we'd have I can't remember the lines, but we'd have something like have her say something, and she's like, I just don't where is she reading this from a book? Where's this coming from?" And she
Oh
couldn't
my
get it. She
god.
didn't get it. So we're like so Tom Schumacher said who the president of feature animation was having a great time with, just loved Jennifer Tilly in, Monsters, Inc. And so he said, "Why don't you try Jennifer Tilly?" And I initially resisted it because I'm like, "I don't want that. I think that's a little expected." And then I was like, "Well, let's give it a try." And then she came in and went, "Oh, my sister's just like this. I know who this is. I got it." And she's like, she'll come. What's interesting is she comes in and she plays that character in a lot of movies, like the kind of the ditz.
Yeah.
But she'll come in and she's like, "Okay, I got it." And then what's funny, she'll get behind the mic and she kinda goes like that. So you can see her like she kinda like does the face, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, she's gone to that place." And then that voice comes out, and you're like, this is perfect. It
She's
works."
zoned out.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
spaced out on you.
She just kinda like does that funny thing with her face, and she's hilarious in that movie.
Mhm.
So
I want to, can I ask about my favorite character?
Well,
sure.
yes, the more controversial figures in this movie that we might have to dive into later, but
I love Alameda Slim. Like, was that
Okay.
always was he always like as he is, or was that a decision made later down the road?
Alameda Slim was the idea that there was the character, the bad guy was a cattle rustler who could hypnotize cows with a yodel, came from one of the
Yeah.
story artists.
Mm.
Our take on him came from like we thought first I don't know who came up with the idea that he'd be this big guy, this really big kind of
Whoever
like
did, that was a great decision. He looks
manly cowboy. I think it may have been Will, but Will had this Will had seen Randy in Freaked, that
oh, he's
Alex
amazing
Winter
and
movie.
freaked.
I am just, and it's based on that performance. So
Oh,
we had
okay.
somebody, I think Chris Buck animated a test to the voice track, to that voice, and it was perfect. So Alameda Slim is basically that voice. It's based on that performance from Randy. And truth be told, when Randy came in, I know he's having some issues now, but
Mhm.
he was
On the
he
run for
was
the US government right now.
he was a sweet, just a really genuinely warm, friendly guy. Such a nice guy, such a really nice, I mean, really funny, worked real hard, um, really kind, really generous, really complimentary, easy to deal with, easy to direct. Just I don't know what's happened. I mean, it's been what, 21, 22 years. I don't
Yeah,
know what has happened in his life that has brought him to that place, but I had nothing but good things to say about Randy.
fair enough. I do want to ask because I will be kicked if I don't. How much of the singing or Randy does as Alameda is actually him versus a proper yodeler?
Okay, so all of the stuff, da 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 da, all the verse stuff is Randy,
Okay.
and through the magic of and Randy can get something. He kind of speak sings it.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
wherever he's at a key, they just nudge it into key with Pro Tools. And it wasn't like a "Ruh," it was just like "Dook." It was just like a nudge to get it in the zone.
Mhm.
All of the yodeling is like you can hear him start to yodel. So we recorded him going yodely lily. We recorded him doing that. But then we drop his yodel out for two other yodelers, two other
Oh,
Okay.
guys. There was
two
one
guys.
guy that is more of a traditional yodeler, country western guy who's really artful with it, and took it really seriously. And
Well, you
the other
played
guy
your
was like more of he was a country western guy, but he also kind of did the Swiss kind of yodeling,
Mhm.
and it was just a little weirder. So it took two guys. We kind of mashed two guys in there to like just make it strange. The original thought behind the yodeling was Will had seen, and I can't remember the name of the guy. It was this really big, and that's one of the things where Alameda Slim. I'm remembering where Alameda Slim's girth came from. I can't remember the name of the guy, but I've seen him in movies. He was a country western guy, and he yodeled in all of his songs. Massive guy, really big. So that's where the idea that Slim is this big, huge, fat guy. That's where
Mhm.
that came from. Is the fact that it was Don something, and I can't remember the name. I can't remember his name. But we looked into getting him, and he at that time his health was so poor he couldn't. There's no way he could have done it. So we found somebody who knew what he did and said, "Oh yeah, I think I can get it into that zone." And then we found someone else, just blended them.
Mhm. All right. While we're talking about Alameda, I do want to get a fact check here. It says in my research that his original plan was to take all these cows and storm the Capitol to plant himself as president.
Did
And
somebody
that
just make
was,
that up?
I'm
No, that
curious.
was real. That came
And
from that came and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I still think that's a better idea.
yes,
I think
It's
it's a better
kinda
idea.
it's
It's
just out there. It's like, "What?"
it's
and it's
crazy. It's
and
absolutely
it's
crazy.
a little
It
too real nowadays, maybe.
Well, it was too real at the time because George Bush had just stolen the election back. He stole
Oh,
the
That's
you're
election
right,
back
right.
with
then,
the that was
and he
yeah,
was from
that's true.
Texas. And he was from Texas. So a lot of people thought it was too even on the crew thought it was too political. I still to this day think it's a better I
That
it's a funnier, more interesting idea.
But yeah, 'cause, in the movie, all he does is sell them, which is like,
Yeah,
and
he just yeah. But to take cows to make them turn them into basically a
an army.
zombie army that they can and it's like what was funny was like there's that did you guys see that Tarzan movie with the guy from True Blood playing Tarzan? I can't remember his name.
oh, I know what you're talking about, like the remake one.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Yeah.
It's a great Tarzan movie. But at the end, he basically does what Alameda Slim does. He calls all the critters and they they all like stampede and bust up
Yeah.
the town and mess up the bad guys. And I leaned over to my wife when we were watching. I went, "See, that would have worked."
I agree. Like that would have been an amazing ending. And me and Andrew were joking before you hopped on. Like we want like the Cruella version of Alameda Slim,
Alameda?
the
Yeah.
Maleficent, where we
But
get to see his
yeah,
side of the story.
do you see now? Do you Well, what's interesting is we boarded that as a
Mhm,
short. That short we boarded it from the Willie's point of view.
mhm.
Sam Levine boarded a short that like they're in prison and they're wondering how they got there, so they tell their side of the story, and it's Home on the Range is told by the Willie brothers,
Is
and
this
it's
like on Disney Plus? Like, is
no, it
this the
never got made. That short never got made.
Oh,
But
dang it.
if you guys dig up the DVD, we've got a story reel version of Alameda Slim laying out his plan to take over the country as president. You can probably find it on YouTube.
Oh.
I
Yeah,
can
that's
confirm this deleted scene is on the Disney Plus release. So if on Disney Plus, go look this up. These boards are
And
really
it's
good.
and I think it's hilarious, and I think it's better
And you have
than what we
Alameda
ultimately did.
dressed up as Uncle Sam? Oh my god.
Yeah,
I just I just want to ask just a basic question. Do you like Home on the Range?
Yeah.
I love and hate it. I both love and hate it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things I think that I like about it. I had the best compliment I ever had, and hopefully I hope he doesn't mind that I quote him on this. I had lunch a couple years ago with Jorge Gutierrez when he
Mm.
was at Netflix working on Maya and the Three, and he was telling me how much he loved bits and pieces of Home on the Range, specifically Buck's dream, the sequence where Buck
Mhm.
has his dream and he fights the bad guys.
That part's pretty fun,
And
yeah.
he asked me like how we came up with that, and I told him about where that whole sequence came from and how we conceived it, and it was and he was like, and he said we used to have printouts of that, like screenshots of it up when we were making El Tigre, and I went, really? And he said, oh, it's a great sequence, it's so good, and I went, that's a great thing to hear from somebody I really like and respect. So he loved it. It was a thing, and that was a thing where uh, so there's bits and pieces like that where I'm really proud of it.
Mhm.
And I'm proud of there's other things I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that we never come right out and explain to the audience why Grace can't be hypnotized. We never have characters go, oh, Grace can't be hypnotized because of X, Y, and Z. We just demonstrate it and people get it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's I'm actually I'm proud of that because that at the time it was people you usually had execs saying, well,
Spoon
you have
feed
to
it to
spell
the
that out.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like no, don't need to spell it out.
Mhm.
So
Alright.
there's things I like about it, and then there are things I that just bother me. There's lots of things that I don't think it's I think it lacks. I don't think it's as funny as it could have been. I don't think it's as weird as it could have been, and I
Mhm.
don't think it is as fun to watch. I was is say is it we ultimately could have made it, and some of that is because of some of that is our fault, and some of that is just the studio just not wanting to make waves and wanting to make they wanted to make a cart they were hell bent on making a movie for 8-year-olds or
Yeah.
5 to 8-year-olds, and so it plays that way. And then um, I think that but I learned a lot and got to work with a lot of great people, and so it's a love hate thing. So like it's
I think that's a fair position on
yeah,
Home on the Range, so
yeah.
It is. I am curious, do you prefer the title Home on the Range or Sweatin' Bullets?
I think Home on the Range is more appropriate because there's no bullets in Sweating Bullets. There are no
That's
bullets.
fair. Mhm.
and
It's
the song that opens the movie is Home on the Range, so yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. The
I
big problem with that title is that it calls up images of that other song, of the home on the range.
Yeah.
That and that was always an issue. That was an issue that we kind of foresaw, but when we try and come up with other titles, once we figured out that we couldn't or shouldn't use sweating bullets, that was the only one that really stuck. So that's fine.
All right. Forgive me for getting a little tabloidy here. I do kind of want to ask about the Roseanne Barr in the room and what she was like to have in the voice box or the voiceover box, so to say.
She was great. She
Okay,
was
good.
really, yeah, she was really good. We cast her because, and that was a combination of me and Will Finn
Hmm.
wanting just a more strong comedic voice. When we, as nice and as sweet as Janae Dubois was, we didn't we were having trouble getting our hands around that character in a way that, like, when you write, like, when we would sit down and do write Mushu lines, it was easy because you would just channel Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley. That's what Mushu was. Mushu was based on
Hmm.
actual Axel Foley from Beverly Hills Cop. So
Yeah.
you would just think, what would Axel Foley do in this situation? And then boom, and then the dialogue would nearly write
Hmm.
itself. Um, we had a hard time just having a comedic point of view with Maggie until we, like, started imitating Roseanne saying things, and we would just start doing Roseanne to each other. And at the time, it being 2000, 2002, 2001, 2002,
Hmm.
there weren't a lot of, like, you didn't have Sarah Silverman wasn't a big comedian yet. I think if we were making it now, I'd push for someone like Sarah Silverman or uh, not who's like Tina Fey or someone like
Hmm.
that. With just a more interesting comedic um, persona, because they're all over the place now. You can't swing a dead cat
Hmm.
without hitting a funny comedian woman, comic woman. But back then, you
Not
go,
as common back then.
yeah, it just wasn't as
Hmm.
common because people they weren't pushing them. They weren't allowing them. First of all, I mean, if you looked at Saturday Night Live at the time, it was mostly guys.
Yeah.
Most comic movies or most comedians being pushed into the culture were men. I think Dane Cook was big at the time,
Hmm.
for God knows why. Um,
Like the only comic female voice I'm thinking of at the time is like Janine Garofalo, and even
it
that
was
she was
funny, but not appropriate for that. I
right.
like I like Janine a lot, but she's not. She wouldn't fit in that character, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
Um,
fascinating thing. My first thought when I watched the film, because I watched it as an adult as opposed to, is like, oh, Disney Synergy. Like they were like, oh, she's on one of our big TV shows, Disney Synergy. Come on, like, and
but
I'm
she
glad to
wasn't at
hear.
the time.
Okay,
That
you're
that show
right.
was over.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and that was actually a hard sell to the studio. They didn't want to do it initially, but
Hmm.
we were at a point where they were like, this movie isn't working, and you guys need to figure out how to make it work. And we're like, well, if in order to, like, get a good comedic, if you want a good comedic, strong comedic voice, if we write that character like this,
Hmm.
it'll be funnier. And there are people on the crew who think we're idiots and think we're wrong, and I don't think they're right. I think they're wrong. I mean, I think it depends on who you talk to, but I think Roseanne did bring something to the movie that was kind of unique
Hmm.
and was uh, at least contemporary. Because the one thing that we fought on that movie quite a bit was the fact that it felt dated. It felt it for I mean, the thing that Mike Gabriel and Mike Giammo were, they grew up with like Roy Rogers and
The old
Randolph
westerns.
Yeah.
Scott. So that's what they thought what Western was. And I grew up with Clint Eastwood and spaghetti westerns, and Unforgiven was one of my favorite movies. And even that's kind of at that point that's kind of old, but it's more contemporary. That's why Rico the Bounty Hunter as like a Clint Eastwood
Yeah.
pastiche,
Mhm.
because we were like that he should be this. This is more contemporary, more fun. But Roseanne kind of brought the at least brought the movie into the 20th century, even though we were in the 21st. It just had it brought a more modern comedic sensibility to the movie that we were struggling with at first. So I still think it was a good idea.
No, I think so too. Honestly, I every single defense you've made of every part makes entire sense of how it ended up there.
Yeah.
Um, was there ever any point where the studio came to you and was like, McDonald's is saying this and we've got a tie-in, or oh, for marketing's sake, can we do XYZ or things like that, or were they kind of hands off?
Um, the studio hates that I say this, but McDonald's didn't tell us to put anything in the movie, but it's because of McDonald's that the title changed.
Okay.
Huh.
They were not comfortable having the word bullets on their oh so healthy Happy Meals
Which,
and
yeah.
shakes and stuff like that. And
Ridiculous.
yeah, so what the joke I always made was and this is before Chick-fil-A had their issues. I said, "Go with Chick-fil-A then." Um, 'Cause they didn't wanna the other thing is they weren't comfortable, like, they didn't want to we were cautioned against vilifying the meat industry. So you'll notice that the cows are never threatened with they're never referred to as hamburger, they're never threatened with being eaten, they're never threatened with being chopped up.
The
None of
only
that is
farm shown
ever
is a dairy farm.
yeah, it's a dairy farm.
Mhm.
There's no mention of them being used for meat or turned into hamburger or anything like
Even the
that.
villain, they don't say what's gonna happen to the cows.
No.
Nebulous things. You'll be sold.
You're
Yeah,
getting sold and loaded onto a train and
and then you'll go to a Candyland, I guess.
Yeah.
Make your own connections there, kids.
Yeah, so that was something that frustrated me because they were like, at some point, they did come to us and say and the word that was thrown around was gravitas. I remember this meeting. Your movie has no gravitas. There's no gravitas. The villain isn't threatening enough. And we're like, well, um, Captain Hook is threatening because 5 minutes from the first time you see him, he shoots a guy just for singing. Well, you can't do that. And we're like, well, another way is if he threatens to chop up the cows into hamburger. Our heroines never really undergo any credible threat. Well, you
Mhm.
can't do that. Like, and I just at that point we just went
The
because
worst the villain does is yell at his,
yeah,
cohorts.
Mhm.
yeah, it's just kind of it's that's why the movie's kind of milk toasty. It's like imagine Finding Nemo if nobody ever tries to eat that fish, the orange fish and the blue fish. I can't remember their names.
I think that's pretty close to what it
Yeah.
is.
You got the Ellen fish and you got the Albert Brooks fish.
Yeah, those 2
Yeah,
fish.
the
Imagine
2
those fish are
fish.
never threatened with being eaten,
Mhm.
and that never that's not a threat. And it's like, well, then where are the stakes?
Um, like even like just like, could you have like threatened him like turning him into pelts or like using their horns or something like that? I'm just like, how could you get around that? Like,
We just couldn't. The one thing we
Yeah.
did try and do is we had at some point, and this is on I think this is on Disney Plus too, is we had a bunch of coyotes show up and try and
Mhm.
chase them around. But even that, like we had that in the movie for a bit, and that went nowhere. So we pulled that out. Um, and
There's the vultures that maybe want to eat the tone deaf one.
yeah, there's the vultures, but vultures eat everything dead.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's just a comedic beat that we came up with
The
that
vultures
used to be
fly away
much
too,
longer.
so
Um, that's all it is. All dead things are eaten by vultures, so there's no
Mhm.
risk. But I think that's one of the reasons it's so soft. Is that the cows never really undergo any kind of threat.
We do, for our own comedic reasons, have to bring up one person that I
Oh,
want to make it's
This is
Andrew
just
knows where
someone
this
we
is
like to
going.
talk about, but I know where it's going.
We got to talk about the nostalgia critic, the nostalgia critic here.
Oh, yeah.
Just short, because we like to talk about the nostalgia critic. We don't really like him
we
very much.
we don't like him at all. But
Did you read the tweet that I
oh
wrote about
yes,
how I wanted to beat him up? Okay,
um, your exact quote, if you don't mind me reading it for you.
you can go ahead.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love it when people live stream Home on the Range and tweet comments, good or bad. It's fun. Except you, nostalgia critic. You can go fuck yourself, you unfunny douche nozzle. My issue was the incredible abrasive tone of his review, and in particular, when he accused the crew of Home on the Range of laziness. You can say what you want about the movie, it's deeply flawed, and our crew was anything but lazy. I won't stand for that.
Yeah.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
We
I
applaud your efforts.
I don't
Yes.
think I would I don't think I would ever threaten to beat him up again because that was years ago, and to be perfectly honest, I've had um, a lot of therapy. To be perfectly honest,
Mhm.
and I'm not an angry person anymore. I'm not like that angry, but I do take issue with people who characterize work the work that was done on that movie as being lazy. Nobody was lazy. There was no laziness at all in that movie. People,
Honestly, it's a lazy critique is what it is. It's
yeah,
just saying, "Oh, well, the movies I don't like the movies, so everyone who made it was lazy."
yeah. I think if he and I don't mind it when people criticize things.
Mhm.
I criticize Home in the Range. There was there was a woman, and I can't pronounce her name because it's like a Chinese name,
Mhm.
who's a science fiction writer who did a wonderful like tweet watch and tweet thing with Mulan, where she called us out, like talked about everything she loved, but called us out for stuff she thought was either
Mhm.
historically inaccurate or just kind of lame. And she was spot on with all of it, like dead on the nose. And like Tim Hodge, who was another guy who boarded on the one, and we both I went in and we were like, "That's a fair cop. Here's why that
Mhm.
happened." We were just like there was a scene where she said, "How come they're just like where they're all sitting around a dinner table and it's that tense dinner moment where
Yeah.
Milan finally blows up, and she's like, they've got rice, they've got tea. Where's the rest of the food? Where's the entrees? We don't Chinese people just don't eat rice." And I just went, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I boarded that. I put rice and I put tea and I didn't put anything else on the table, and that's my fault." And what's funny is people have since said, "Well, the layout people and the animation team, they could have put more stuff on the table." I went, "If I'd have put the stuff there, they'd have put it there. But
Mhm.
because I left the table blank, they didn't do any more than that. So that's my fault."
I
And that's a fair cop. However, when some guy, and I remember his okay, this movie really does no good.
Wow, that was, like, spot on. You
Yeah,
channeled him.
that's how his review begins. You know, he has that really annoying voice, and
I think Jess does a really good impression
I
usually.
have his entire review typed up here, like, and it
it's
is terrible.
yeah, he's lousy. And I've since had people like when after I tweeted that, that's the tweet where like every 2 months or so I'll go in and I'll click the heart to see, when you get that little number. Oh,
Mhm.
click. Somebody will have retweeted that. That's still like, and I tweeted that like 2 or 3 years ago. Like, no, 2018 was that when I first tweet? I
It
think I
had
was
to have
on.
been around
It
there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was on DC Superhero Girls when I typed that up. I was like sitting in my office at Warner Brothers and just went and hit
Did
send.
you watch his, video, like, in full?
I couldn't get all the way through it.
Oh my
So
god.
I
And
saw,
those are his short ones too. Those are only,
yeah,
like, a minute
I
long or so.
I literally couldn't get all the way through it. And then I've since heard people say that he did a critique of The Wall, and I said, "Well, that's appropriate."
Critique
A
is
guy
a
who can't write, a guy who's not funny, a guy with no talent, doing, doing a takedown of one of one of the most culturally significant albums and movies
He doesn't even understand what it's about. Like
of
if
the
you watch
70s.
the
Of course he doesn't. Of course he doesn't.
This is an amazing interview. This is like an all-time best interview we've ever done.
He doesn't understand anything that involves any kind of thought. And all you have to do what's interesting is you could go to Wikipedia and hear Roger Waters, and I'm sure you can go to I've never done it, because I had the album, I saw the movie, I grew up in the '70s and '80s. I
You have
know what
critical thought.
that stuff's in my DNA.
yeah.
And that guy, I don't think he's that much younger than I am. For him to just, like, have something like that just go over his head
He thinks it's about how kids don't like school. That's
because
what he thinks.
he heard that one song.
Yeah, because
And
heard the
getting
one song.
and getting canceled on Twitter. Don't forget that he made it
Yeah,
about
he
himself.
thinks about getting canceled on Twitter.
He took
I
one song
Sorry,
that is, like,
it's
one
great.
part of this that's like critiquing that's like taking, and I don't think I'm overstating this, that's like taking, Beethoven's Ninth and critiquing "da na na" and saying that part's wrong.
That part is bad, and
Yeah,
therefore the whole thing is bad,
yeah,
really.
that's that's what that's like. Or
Right.
finding one sentence in East of Eden that maybe doesn't work. It's it's a broader work, and he's taking that one little bit because that's the only thing he's heard. He didn't take time to watch the movie. He didn't take time to listen to the record. He didn't take time to listen to interviews. He knows nothing about music. He knows nothing about anything, and he just and all he can do is just fling his feces at the screen.
All right, we can't go too much further because we'll talk about
no.
Nostalgia Critic all night.
We
But
will. We've
that
done it
was a
before.
great quote. Well,
That
that's excellent.
excellent quote. And now I am just waiting for the day you live tweet watching of Suburban Nights, Doug Walker's film.
Oh, I didn't know
God,
he made a movie.
he made 3 in there.
He
That's
made 3,
appropriate.
and the last one is 4 hours long and completely unwatchable.
Okay.
We have to stop, Jess.
We have to stop. So, one final question, and then we'll wrap this all up. If you had to write a pitch, Mr. Disney himself calls you up and is like, "Hey, John, Home on the Range 2. What do we got?"
Oh, I know exactly what that would be, because
Okay.
I actually came up with a joke version of it
Okay.
that I pitched to Pam Coates as a joke, and I said, "Here it is," and, there's a tr there's a cult. A cult comes that worships cows and kidnaps Maggie, and they take her to an island, and it's this weird little civilization, and they kidnapped her from the farm, they take her to this small island, and they pull a tarp off this thing, and there's a statue of Maggie, and they decide that she's their goddess. And
What?
Grace and Maggie, Grace and Calloway, and the other ones, the
goat and
funnier
the
members,
bunny,
the goat, the pig, Buck can come along, and that chicken,
the
and the
rabbit
duck,
with one
and the
leg.
duck.
Can he come?
They can all go. They all go to rescue her, and it's a rescue mission. It's called Let's Get Maggie. Home on the Range 2, Let's Get Maggie, and that was my pitch. And initially, it was like, I think I made it was a lot less culturally sensitive back then. I think it was like, I said, uh, she goes like somebody from India kidnaps her, and because they worship cows
Mm.
there. That, but this would be just like
We
an
gotta distance
Illuminati
ourselves from that a little
type
bit.
cut.
Yeah.
This is an Illuminati type
It'd be
cult where they,
Cowanan.
yeah, they were like they would, yes, and then and they and what was funny is when I pitched that to Pam and I went like that, she went,
That's pretty good.
and she went, "I don't think we can make it India." That was her first, and I went, "Pam, this is a joke. This is a joke." And but she was like thinking about it. She was considering it because it was like back when we were doing the straight to DVD
Mm,
things. And then
right.
Will once said something in front of Roseanne that made her mad. And so as a way of getting out of it, said, "John had a funny idea for Home on the Range too," and then pushed me in front of her. And she said, "What is it?" And so I pitched it, and she went, "That's hilarious. Why aren't you making that?" And I went, "I don't know." Thanks.
There's a huge market for Home on the Range too. Like we gotta be cashing in here.
But yeah, that was my pitch, is just to make it about all the characters going to rescue one of the other characters from someplace else. Basically ripping off Toy Story 2.
Yeah.
I was gonna
But
say it sounds
Yeah,
kind of
it's
like
Toy
Toy
Story
Story
2.
2.
It's Toy Story 2,
is there
which
any
is
way you could bring Alameda Slim where they have to team up with him because he is the only one that knows how to find cows?
that might
I
be
want
funny.
Almy to swim back.
That might be funny. I also think, yeah, I think it would be great to have Alameda Slim, like, you see him in cut to Alameda Slim, and he's in prison, and he's just like, they think he's gone crazy. He's just kinda yodeling to himself, "No, no, no." And then finally, they're like, "Ah, he's gone crazy," and then you come in, and you bring the you 'cause the camera's on his back, and then you bring the camera around, and you see there's a roach on the floor, and he goes, and the roach snaps to, and then he yodels a little louder, and a
Oh,
bunch
it's
of
not
roaches come out
just
of the
cows.
wall,
It's
and he goes, "I think I can work with this," and then he uses the roaches to escape
this
the
is the
prison.
Home on the Range post-credit scene, like
Yeah,
the Marvel era.
Home on the Range 2,
yeah,
Let's Get Maggie, the post-credit scene to imply that Almeida ain't quite so done yet.
yeah. He uses roaches to escape from prison.
He's gonna fight Ant-Man. It's gonna be excellent.
Yeah. That or
Um,
rats. Either roaches or rats, either one. But I
ooh,
think
both.
rats is too on the nose because he's based on the Pied Piper, but if you make it roaches, I think
Yeah.
it's fine.
And roaches can be made cute. You can make them colorful and all that.
Oh, yeah.
John, this was so much fun. I appreciate you jumping down whatever tangent we gave you. It was wonderful. Please promote your stuff out there for people to find you.
What am I doing? I'm currently working with a wonderful group of folks in Nashville. We're making there's a series of fantasy books called the Wing Feather Saga, and we are making a series out of it, and
Ooh.
it will look like nothing you've ever seen. It doesn't look like Pixar, it doesn't look like Disney. It's its own thing, kind of a painterly look, and that's going to be coming out in November, December. No, December, I think.
Uh,
And it'll be
December
up,
next month or December next year?
I think December of this year. I think it's coming out soon.
Ooh. Ooh,
And
that's actually
Okay.
very exciting.
yeah,
Wow.
it'll pop up on YouTube, and then it'll pop up on an app. And it's a crowd-funded, like, independent investors are involved in it, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever worked on.
I,
I'm an episode director and it starts with 7. We've got 6 episodes the first season, and we'll do 7 episodes the second season, and then we'll just go from there.
it's exciting.
Yeah, it's
That
fun.
is so flippin' cool. And you've done a lot of amazing work since then too. Like, truly, congratulations to you on the incredible work, including Home on the Range. As I actually enjoyed the movie quite a bit.
Oh, great. That's
I
good
was
to hear.
I was shockingly positive on it in our episode as well. And if there is a musical you want to come on and do a proper musicals with cheese episode, and we'll dive into that. Maybe around when your show's coming out, we can arrange something like that. We'd love to be able to help you for because you came out and did this with us, and this was
Oh, no
fun.
problem. No problem. I'm gonna dive in and listen to more of your stuff. Have you guys ever done an episode on the movie version of how to succeed in business without really trying?
We did the
Not the
stage
movie
show,
version.
but
We did the stage.
the movie's covered in there because we did watch a bit of the movie, but
Okay, I'll go
they're
back and
about the
listen.
same.
That's one of my favorites. That's one of my
It's a
favorite
good,
musicals. Yeah,
it's a
it's
good.
really good.
Robert Morris is incredible in that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Um,
it's amazing.
so cool. All right, guys, we'll see you next time on Musicals with Cheese.